World War I was a global conflict that engulfed Europe from 1914 to 1918. It involved most of the world's great powers assembled in two opposing alliances. The Allies, centered on the Triple Entente of Britain, France and Russia, and the Central Powers, originally centered on the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria, Hungary and Italy. These alliances were largely dissolved after the war, and new ones were created. This war, originally called the Great War, was one of the deadliest conflicts in history, with millions of soldiers and civilians losing their lives. The war was characterized by its unprecedented scale of violence, new technologies, and far-reaching consequences that shaped the 20th century. The causes of World War I were complex and interconnected. Nationalism, imperialism, militarism, and a complex web of alliances among European nations created a powder keg of tensions. In the early 20th century, Europe was a continent on edge. Intense nationalism, particularly in the newly unified Germany and the Balkan states, fueled rivalries and territorial disputes. The great powers engaged in a fierce arms race, building up their armies and navies in a bid for dominance. Imperialism, the pursuit of colonies and empires, also created competition and mistrust among the European powers. Colonies were seen as sources of raw materials, markets for manufactured goods and strategic assets. Militarism, the glorification of military strength and the belief that war was inevitable and even desirable, permeated many European societies. Military leaders exerted significant influence on government policies, and military spending soared. The immediate trigger for World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914. The assassination was carried out by Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist who was part of a group called the Black Hand. Austria-Hungary, determined to crush Serbian nationalism, issued an ultimatum to Serbia with deliberately unacceptable demands. Serbia's partial acceptance of the ultimatum was deemed insufficient by Austria-Hungary, which declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. The intricate web of alliances then came into play. Russia, bound by treaty to protect Serbia, began mobilizing its army. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, viewed Russia's mobilization as a threat and declared war on Russia on August 1, 1914. 2 days later, Germany declared war on France, Russia's ally, and invaded neutral Belgium to bypass French defenses. Britain, obligated to defend Belgium's neutrality, declared war on Germany on August 4, 1914. World War I witnessed the rise of trench warfare on an unprecedented scale. On the Western Front, a line of trenches stretching for hundreds of miles from the English Channel to Switzerland became the defining feature of the conflict. Soldiers on both sides endured horrific conditions in these trenches, facing constant shelling, machine gun fire and the threat of disease. Attacks across no man's land, the desolate area between enemy trenches, often resulted in heavy casualties for minimal gains. The invention of new weapons, such as machine guns and poison gas, made warfare more deadly than ever before. Life in the trenches was a nightmare. Soldiers faced constant danger, disease and psychological strain. Rats, lice and trench foot were common ailments. The deafening roar of artillery fire and the sight of mangled bodies left lasting scars on those who survived. Section 5. Key battles, turning points of the Great War. The Battle of the Marne, in September 1914, marked the end of Germany's hopes for a swift victory on the Western Front. The First Battle of Ypres, from October to November 1914, saw the British Expeditionary Force suffer heavy losses, but managed to hold the line against German offensives. The Battle of Verdun, which lasted from February to December 1916, was one of the longest and bloodiest battles of the war, with enormous casualties on both the French and German sides. The Battle of the Somme, launched by the British from July to November 1916 to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun, became synonymous with the horrors of trench warfare. The Brusilov Offensive, a major Russian offensive against Austria-Hungary from June to September 1916, achieved significant initial success but ultimately failed to break the stalemate on the Eastern Front. The entry of the United States into the war in April 1917, following Germany's resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare, tipped the balance in favor of the Allies. Section 6. Leaders of the War. Heroes and Villains. World War I saw the rise of prominent leaders who shaped the course of the conflict. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, a symbol of German militarism, played a key role in the events leading up to the war. General Erich Ludendorff and Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg emerged as influential German military leaders. On the Allied side, British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, French Prime Ministers Georges Clemenceau and Raymond Poincaré, and Russian Tsar Nicholas II played crucial roles. General Douglas Haig, commander of the British Expeditionary Force, and General Philippe Pétain, hero of Verdun, were among the prominent military figures. Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States, initially sought to maintain American neutrality, but ultimately led his country into the war on the side of the Allies. His 14 points, a set of principles for post-war peace, influenced the subsequent peace negotiations. Section 7. New technologies changing the face of warfare. World War I witnessed the introduction of new technologies that revolutionized warfare. Machine guns, capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, dramatically increased firepower and contributed to the stalemate on the Western Front. Poison gas, first used by the Germans in 1915, caused widespread terror and suffering. Tanks, first deployed by the British in 1916, were initially unreliable, but eventually proved their worth as offensive weapons. Airplanes, initially used for reconnaissance, evolved into fighter planes and bombers, adding a new dimension to warfare. Submarines, particularly those deployed by Germany, posed a significant threat to Allied shipping. These technological advancements had a profound impact on the nature of warfare, making it more mobile, deadly, and impersonal. They also led to the development of new tactics and strategies such as combined arms warfare and strategic bombing. Section 8. The end of an era, the armistice and its aftermath. By 1918, after more than 4 years of devastating warfare, both sides were exhausted. The German offensives of spring 1918 had failed, and the Allies launched a series of counteroffensives that drove German forces back. Faced with dwindling resources, internal unrest, and the collapse of its allies, Germany sued for peace. The Armistice of Compiègne, signed on November 11, 1918, marked the end of hostilities. The war had a profound impact on the political map of Europe. The Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian empires collapsed, leading to the creation of new nations. Germany was defeated and blamed for the war, facing harsh penalties under the Treaty of Versailles. Section 9. World War I's enduring legacy, a world forever changed. World War I had a profound and lasting impact on the world. It led to the deaths of millions of people, devastated economies, and shattered empires. The war also ushered in a new era of global politics, marked by the rise of totalitarian regimes, the emergence of new ideologies, and the seeds of future conflicts. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to prevent future wars, imposed harsh penalties on Germany that fueled resentment and contributed to the rise of extremism. The war also led to the creation of the League of Nations, the first international organization dedicated to preventing future wars. However, the League proved ineffective in the face of rising aggression in the 1930s. World War I left an indelible mark on the 20th century, shaping the course of history and leaving behind a legacy of loss, trauma, and the enduring quest for peace.